So the one thing that most people never really think about or talk about is really the strategy for getting the love of your life back and moving on from them is the same. Right? So we're getting this question all the time. The love of my life left me. What do I do? Now, when someone used to ask us this question in the past, we would typically ask the client, okay, well, what is it that you want? Do you want to get them back or do you want to move on from them? And funnily enough, we don't need to ask that anymore because the best approach is twofold. You literally need to take the same steps in the post-breakup period if you want them back and if you want to get over them. And now we believe that this is because most of our clients' exes have an avoidant attachment style. Now, if you're not familiar with what an avoidant attachment style is, there's a bunch of resources that you can read, but basically the quick crash course version is looking at core wounds. So typically speaking, there are four main attachment styles. You have a secure attachment style, an avoidant attachment style, an anxious attachment style, and a fearful attachment style. Now, where this is relevant is these four attachment styles can be divided up into two categories. You have the secure attachments and the insecure attachments. Now, the main goal with every single attachment theory out there is to take someone who has an insecure attachment and make them more secure over time. Secure attachments don't really have many core wounds that will trigger them, whereas insecure attachments do. So, for example, an avoidant insecure attachment will have a core wound revolving around a loss of independence. That means anything that threatens their independence will cause them to go into a flight mechanism. They're going to avoid the situation. They'll break up with you. They'll do all sorts of different things. An anxious person has a great fear of abandonment as their core wound. So anytime they're going through a breakup, their core wound gets triggered and they act incredibly desperate. Or sometimes we even see this kind of plague the relationship throughout, where they're constantly asking for reassurance because they're constantly worried of the looming threat of losing you. And then really the unicorns are the fearful avoidant attachment styles. And the fearful avoidant attachment styles have both core wounds. They swing 1 minute from the anxious core wound of wanting to be independent and the next minute to an anxious core wound of not wanting to be independent, wanting to be really close with someone, worried that they're going to be left alone forever, and then back again to the avoidant attachment style. And they just swing almost like a pendulum back and forth, back and forth. It can be incredibly frustrating. But we believe since most of our exes have an avoidant attachment style, one interesting thing about avoidance is most avoidants don't want to, quote unquote, come back until they feel like you've moved on. And this makes sense. Once you've given an avoidant their independence, they take some time apart and they start to romanticize the past relationship with you, making them slowly kind of inch back towards you. So no matter what, the best approach is about finding a way to cope with the pain you're feeling. So how do you cope? Well, I've put together a simple 5-step plan that I believe is going to make a major difference for helping you cope with the pain you're feeling. And also, by the end of these 5 steps, you can make a decision on whether or not you want to get your ex back or not. So, the 5 steps are simple. Step number 1 is to implement a no contact rule. Now, we've talked about the no contact rule extensively on this website, almost ad nauseum. But once again, the one thing I'm going to really highlight is don't fall for the fad of thinking that the no contact rule alone will make them come back. A lot of times when you search online, specifically for success stories, and sometimes we're even guilty of this on our website, success stories revolving around the no contact rule, you can kind of be lulled into this false sense of, hey, all I need to do is just do this no contact rule, ignore my ex for X amount of days, and they'll come back. It'll make them miss me. The reality is that's not the case. In fact, we found that the golden thread that kind of connects most of our success stories is that they use their time during the no contact rule to engage in something that we call Trinity work. Now, the Trinity work is basically this concept that I came up with that is all about helping you recover after a breakup while at the same time becoming someone that is envious by other people. So the way the Trinity works is it's about looking at your life and dividing it up into 3 distinct categories. You have health categories, wealth categories, and relationship categories. And the goal always is to understand the interconnected nature of these three categories. So for example, when you go through a breakup, obviously the relationship category takes a negative downturn. But the mistake most people make during breakups is they allow that negative downturn in that relationship category to bleed over into the other categories. So because they get depressed, they stop working out. Because they stop working out, they start feeling worse about themselves and don't really do such a good job at work. And because they're not doing such a good job at work, their relationship suffers. And it just kind of creates this negative downward spiral. But what's really cool about the Trinity concept is that you can actually rebuild it by working on the interconnected areas. So a lot of times you're searching online, you're going to Google, trying to find like, hey, how do I cope with the love of my life leaving me? And weirdly enough, the best way to improve that relationships category, because the love of your life will certainly be in that relationships category, is to focus on health or wealth first. And once you get confidence in those areas, relationship starts to kind of repair itself. And so one of the things that we found through interviewing our own success stories is when they implement a no contact rule, if they have a extreme focus on the Trinity work, on repairing the out of balance Holy Trinity, they tend to have better results. So that's one. Step 2 is all about seeking social support. So we have this concept in ex-boyfriend recovery called the sphere of influence. Basically, it's looking at the people that you surround yourself with and ensuring that you're surrounding yourself with people that are actually going to be helpful to you in your life. But the way the sphere of influence is supposed to work is it's supposed to be a collection of people whose opinions that you truly care about. So this can be friends, family members, usually not distant acquaintances or just acquaintances in general. But here's the point. One of the things that we want you to do is to pay attention to your own personal sphere of influence. And sometimes that means making hard decisions. And usually you want to be surrounding yourself with people who listen to you, but also give you great advice. So what you're always looking for is a 50-50 split. And one of the best ways that we've found that you can make a huge difference in your own life is joining a community. So if you feel like your sphere of influence is lacking, joining a community like our community by surrounding yourself by like-minded people who can hold you accountable, who will listen to what you have to say, who you can help, and who also can allow you to gain perspective. Because sometimes, as they say, misery loves company, right? But sometimes what I found is incredibly interesting through talking to our community members is when they are in the community, before they get in the community rather, they believe that their situation is the worst situation imaginable. But sometimes going in and seeing other people going through similar things or sometimes even worse things can put your own situation into perspective. Not necessarily it will make you feel better about yourself, but it will kind of allow you to the perspective to continue getting through something like a no contact rule, continue to seek support from the right areas. So that's step 2, seek social support. Step 3 is getting professional help. So as cliche as this sounds, hire a therapist. So I was actually doing some research because it's obvious that if I were to sit here and tell you people who hire therapy tend to actually benefit more in life than people who do not go to therapy. But it got me thinking, making a blanket statement like that without any kind of research to back it up, it would be kind of irresponsible. So I started going hunting. And I ended up coming across this article by the American Psychiatric Association. In there is an interesting citation. So the American Psychiatric Association claims that 75% of the people who enter psychotherapy show some benefit from it. So this is also very interrelated to step 2. Obviously, seeking social support from your own sphere of influence and even from a trusted community is almost like one area that you can get help. But if you feel like that's not doing it for you, especially if you're really struggling with this breakup, getting professional help, hiring a therapist is probably the next level up. And it's something that we really recommend a lot. We don't really have any recommendations on who you should see just right now. I think that's up to you and if you want to do that. But just know that there's a 75% chance that you going into any kind of psychotherapy, you will show some benefit from it. And especially at a time when you need to be rebuilding your life, that can be a welcome addition. Step 4 is something new. It's called employing the breakup triad strategy. All right, so this is taken directly from science. Like I said, I do a lot of research when I write these articles, and I came across this really long, really complicated paper by APA PsychNet. Basically, it's called The Down-Regulation of Love Feelings After a Romantic Breakup, Self-Report and Electrophysiological Data. Yeah, it's complicated. So essentially, here is what it argues. It basically argues that there's a breakup triad strategy that you should be implementing. And it focused on testing cognitive strategies to help people get over a breakup. So the researchers of this journal tested 3 strategies on 24 heartbroken individuals who had basically just recently gone through a breakup. Now, the first strategy was to negatively reappraise their ex. Basically, focus on their ex's negative qualities. So they would sit the people down and ask the people, can you tell me the negative qualities that your ex had? The second was love reappraisal. So it's basically accepting feelings of love without judgment. Basically, it's an acceptance of the circumstance they're in. And I will admit, this is one of the things that I feel like most of our personal clients struggle with. They really struggle to accept their circumstance. And if you think about it, our website is called Ex-Boyfriend Recovery. The name alone suggests that people are not okay with their circumstance. Either they want their ex back or they want to get over their ex. That's the circumstance they're wanting. But the scientists with these 24 individuals, after they did the first strategy of like, hey, say all the bad things about your ex, they said, hey, now let's accept the situation that we're in. Not everyone succeeded in obviously accepting the situation that they were in, but some did. And the third was really interesting. It was distraction. So the third strategy, the third aspect of this triad was distracting themselves, thinking about positive things unrelated to the ex. Now, the researcher found that all 3 strategies significantly reduced people's emotional response to photos of their exes. So basically, they had these 24 people, sat them down, and then had them do all these 3 things, and then showed them a photo of their ex, and then studied their brain. And they found that it actually kind of worked. What's interesting, though, is not all of these 3 strategies are created equally. So the one that made the biggest difference was the distraction strategy, which made people feel better overall, but it had no effect on how much they love their ex. So distractions are good, but it's not necessarily going to make the biggest difference alone. That's what the other 2 strategies are for. The negative reappraisal strategy had actually an interesting additional effect of decreasing feelings of love towards their ex. So what does this tell us? Basically, that if you want to feel better overall, you need to find ways to distract yourself. If you want to feel better overall and decrease your feelings of love for your ex, you need to start pointing out all the negative aspects of them. My approach is, let's do all 3. Let's think of all the negative things that they did, think of all the negative qualities that they have, distract ourselves, and accept our circumstances. And according to the researchers, the findings are particularly relevant in the age of social media when photos of exes and the resulting pangs of love may come up frequently. One more thing on that. One of the things I've been studying this year is the effect that cortisol has in breakup. If you don't know, when you go through a breakup, neurochemically, cortisol shoots way up. And we've found evidence that suggests that when your cortisol stays in an elevated state, it stays in that elevated state for as long as 6 months, whereas previously it would have just taken maybe 3 hours to kind of come back down to normal. So the point really of getting over a breakup, of dealing and coping with the pain, is to find successful ways to slowly bring cortisol down. Unfortunately, because we live in the age of social media, because there are constant photos of exes, they're posting things on social media, you're getting pinged, your friends are saying, did you see what so-and-so posted? It keeps your cortisol in these elevated states. So it makes getting over a breakup harder than arguably it's ever been before. Luckily, the 3 strategies, this triad, is maybe the best thing that you can do to slowly get that cortisol to come down. And that leads us to step 5, which is making your ultimate decision. So this is maybe a radical thought, but there are 5 steps here. Steps 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. I don't think you should have an opinion on if you should get your ex back or not. You should not have an opinion until you are through the first 4 steps. And the 5th step is making your ultimate decision. Basically, only after you've gone through those first 4 steps fully should you make a decision on whether or not you want to get your ex back. And the beauty of this is we found that people who are okay without their exes have a better chance of getting their exes back. I mean, what's kind of cool about this is it's really easy for me to make this argument because I have interviewed so many people. I can point to cases where this person said this and they got their ex back. This person said that and they got their ex back. And the one consistent theme throughout is getting over your ex seems to be one of these best approaches for getting your ex back. Sure, there are tactical things and best practices that you can do, but ultimately, you should not make a decision until you are comfortable being in a place where you are okay without your ex. And I think that's when you make your ultimate decision. That's when you decide, you know what, I think I'm going to try to get my ex back.